Hello everyone, John Maher here, and this is your Grass10 update on the dairy edge. Well, it has been a reasonably good week for grass growth, I suppose, to put it mildly. Grass growth is close to normal at about 65 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day. Despite the coldness of the air, grass has been growing probably a little bit better than expected. And I suppose the average demand on dairy farms is set around 58. The average farm cover is still above 700 at 746 or over 200 per livestock unit. And what this is causing then is surplus grass on the farm, and which means then that the average pre-grazing yield is 1600, which is just simply too high as we enter into the real stemming phase. And seed head phase of the grazing season. For the record, the diet of the cow was about over 15 kilograms of grass and 3.5 kilograms of meal. Dry matter in Moore Park was around 15%, but in other parts of the country it was close to about 18%. Well, it really depended on where the rain was, but dry matters were a little bit lower this week, I would say, where the rain was. Growth for the week ahead is climbing and will continue to climb higher into next week, given the anticipated increase in sunshine. So, growing beyond 70 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day will probably be the case as the weather improves. It also gives a chance to do some tidy up on the farm in terms of taking out surplus grass, which needs to happen because this is the fourth week in a row that we are in surplus grass, and the stem is coming faster than we would like. Looking at the grass supply in more detail, when you look at the figures, over 50% of the farms have an average farm cover of close to 800 or 225 per livestock unit, which means that the pre-grazing yield is beyond 1700. We look at maybe farms in a more medium range. About a third of farms have about 170, 180 per livestock unit, or just a farm cover under 700, about 670. That's where it would need to be, I suppose, because the pre-grazing yield will come down, and that means you're grazing leafier grass and grass with less stem content in it. I think the other thing that's noticeable at the moment is that because the spring and the first two rotations were challenging with weather, the stem proportions are higher than normal, and I don't think people realise that. And it's bringing its own challenges then in terms of the grass that the animals are grazing. So for the fourth week in a row, the yield of grass the cows are asked to graze and enter is too high at an average of over 1600. Again, we're targeting a farm cover around 650 per livestock, 650 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, or cover per livestock unit, depending on stocking rate, between 160 and 180, especially as growth is anticipated to rise now. So there's an opportunity now between good weather and increased growth to get correction on the farm, and replacing other feeds are going into the diet that are causing problems with grass quality to convert the surplus grass into silage, and high quality silage at that will be needed for another day, and maybe to set aside some land for reseeding, which would also may help to do with the surplus. I suppose when you look at the pre-grazing yield then and what impact it's having on animal performance, I suppose the first one that comes to mind is the milk protein content, because it's very, very sensitive to the energy content of the diet. Stem is low in energy, leaf is high in energy, so the performance is maximized when the pre-grazing yield is around 1400. Grass has a higher proportion of leaf in that case. The fourth leaf doesn't appear. The grass in front of cows is very, very digestible, which makes it easier to eat, and dry matter intake is kept up, and the quality of the diet that they eat is also superior. What we generally see is that the protein content will start dropping once you go into the wrong grass. This is grass that's going to be higher in stem, as a result has a higher pre-grazing yield. It's not unusual to see 0.1% of a drop when you look at milk processor figures, which we have been doing. And every 0.1% of drop is somewhere a drop of 0.65, 0.7 cent per litre on your current milk. That's before we talk about the drop in milk solids yields, because the animals are eating a poor quality diet. And as we go further into May, this becomes a greater challenge, and there will be more stem coming and more dead material coming when the pre-grazing yield is too high. It's also much easier to clean out the swards when the pre-grazing yield is closer to 1400. I suppose when you look, we're going to come to our feature farmer in a minute now. He's grazing even 1300 kilograms, but John will tell you that it's not the perfect 1300. It has a proportion of stem that's even a slight concern to him. And that's just a reflection of the spring. So we just need to come down in terms of what we're grazing. The weather's going to allow you correct, take the opportunity to get into the right grass. For the record, John's protein currently is over 4, which is some going. Just before we go into John's story, the nutrient management in May, I suppose, just to, that we keep going with nitrogen plus sulfur type products. If the farm has got slurry, then the P&K requirements are probably covered. If not, and no compound fertilizer is spread, then keep that in mind. If there's no P allowance, go for a product with nitrogen plus K plus sulfur. Speaking of nutrient content, there's going to be a change in weather here now. The temperatures are going to rise. This should bring clover into the mix that people will be able to, cut back in nitrogen. We're in the last week of May here, so time is moving on. Clover products might get away with just a single spread of soiled water, about 2,000 gallons per acre. You're going to spread a low level of organic nitrogen, and you're going to bring in some PK and even a low level of sulfur. Where bales are removed, which is, I suppose, what I'm suggesting to many of the farmers on this podcast looking at the PBI data, every 4 bales to the acre is the equivalent of about 1,000 gallons of standard slurry. So if we go watery slurry at 1,500 gallons, 2,000 gallons, we'll replace most of the P and K. It's also an opportune time when you cut paddocks for bales that lime can be applied, and we are behind on that nationally and on dairy farmers. Speaking of which, I suppose we just look at the national figures for performance so far this year. Up to last Monday, I suppose, middle of May, there was 3.2 tons of dry matter grown on average across the farm. It's similar enough to average figures for the 5-year average, I suppose, to say the least. When you look at the numbers, I thought it would be higher, to be honest. But anyway, it has been a difficult spring. So that's the story on the numbers. Coming back to John Phelan's story. So John is from Kilmeaden in County Waterford, dry farm now, to say the least, just so we're clear here that the farm I'm going through here. He's milking about 175 cows. It's 45% heifers because they're on the home block. The yield last week was 2.23 kilograms of milk solids per cow per day on 2 kilograms of meal, doing fat at 5.2 and protein at 4.04. It's the highest for protein I've come across this year so far. So I bump into 3/8 and 3/9, but anyway, John's performance is superb, and his breeding season began on the 5th of May. I suppose looking at the grass piece then, his average farm cover is 607 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, stocked at about 3.3, growing 58 for last week, has a farm cover of 183 kilograms of dry matter per livestock unit, and grazing 1,300 kilograms of dry matter per hectare. So good grass. In order to keep the grass right, he has made up to, I suppose, 70 bales. He's made over 70 bales off the grazing platform so far. The clover paddocks, some of them are coming to their own now, and he's going to move to 10 units of nitrogen per acre from now on. The grass-only paddocks will receive about 18 units of nitrogen per acre. And the paddocks that got cut for bales, some of them got 2,000 gallons of watery slurry per acre to replace the nitrogen, in particular the P's and K's. Just to explain that when you remove bales off the field, you're taking away the P's and K's. When you are grazing, you're recycling 90% of the K and probably 2/3 of the P. So that's the story. That's why we chase the slurry onto the silage ground. Looking at the reseeding story for the farm, there's 4 hectares reseeded so far, another 3 hectares spread off this week. And he has also some of the out farm sprayed off. But over 10% of the milking platform is going to be reseeded, and as I said, the out farm is sprayed off as well. So keeping reseeding going. Reseeding has been a bit delayed this year because of the way the spring has come. But there's been a recent surge in it, which is good to see, because the mountain becomes harder to climb next year if you don't reseed this year. To quote, I suppose, one of our other feature farmers, Tom O'Connell, about that. And we should all keep that in mind. So that's the story this week. Big upturn in the weather coming, probably a big upturn on growth coming. Great chance to correct the wrong grass ahead of the cows and have some high quality bales in the yard, I would suggest. So if you'd like to hear more from the Grass10 team, subscribe to the weekly Grass10 newsletter, which is available on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website. And the link to this newsletter is also available in the description of this podcast. I'd like to thank those who support the Grass10 campaign, AIB, Grassland Agro, Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, FBD and your Farmers Journal. This has been your Grass10 update, and I'll talk to you all next week when hopefully the growth is going to be the highest for the year.